This is the date today is 9/23/16, and we're here with Mr. Floyd P. Ward.
Yeah.
What's
Floyd
P
Paul.
stand for?
P stands for Paul. That's what everybody calls me at home.
Okay, birth date and where were you born?
3 November 29, born in Blueford, Illinois, which is 30 miles from Carmi. Lived in Carmi since I was in the 4th grade.
And Floyd, let's tell us about armor in World War II, armor and ammunition. Hold that little thing up here. Tell us what that is, and then we'll talk about other things, because was an ammunition expert for the Army for many, many years.
Yeah, this is a caliber 30 M1A1 rifle. We call it the U.S. M1A1, and fires 8 rounds of these in a clip type situation where you insert the clip from the top and then just start squeezing the trigger and stay out of the way, because it sends that brass off to the right.
And the M1, what was the distance on that? About 300 yards? 200?
Real accurate to 300 yards. And anybody that used it very much, 500 yards.
And how much was it used in World War II, and how significant was it in helping us win the war?
It was amazing when they come out with that rifle. It'd take a lot of abuse in the mud and so forth and still work. I helped train 12,000 people on the M1 at Fort Lewis, Washington one time, and I had kids that never done anything but sat behind a desk, could take the M1 and hit with it after about 2 or 3 settings with me.
So it was you could train a person very well on that M1.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. And that bullet, would that bullet kill somebody?
Oh boy, would it?
Yeah, from a long distance. It could be used for, a sniper could use this too. They don't use it now, but they're more fancier now, but it could be using for sniping.
Yeah, originally started with a hard-coated bullet or projectile and changed that to a soft nose on the thing. And that made it really, you could hit a guy in the shoulder and about take the shoulder off with it. It's soft.
Now, that was one of the important bullets in World War II. We also used it in the Korean War and in Vietnam, and still use it today?
Yes. They're on a 7.62 rifle now, which is not quite as heavy as the M1 was. Evidently a good rifle. I never used it. I've seen several of them, but I've not been around them much.
What are the competitors in Russia, Germany? What were the competitive rifles? Do you remember any of the competitive rifles?
No, not familiar with them.
How about, can you hold that bullet up and tell us the difference between that and a 45 bullet and what we used the 45 bullets for in World War II? We made 3 billion of them in Evansville, Indiana.
45 was a lot larger around, but shorter, and about the same amount of powder that the M1 had. But distance on a 45, you had to be a pretty good shot to hit somebody at 40, 50 yards.
We use it in pistols, and we use it in a machine gun type, that Tommy gun type thing.
Yes.
But it wasn't good for distance. At 100 yards, maybe you're lucky. 50 yards.
You'd be lucky if you hit them at 100 yards, really and truly.
But we made a lot of those for self-defense, and also most of the people had them on their clip.
And they had excessive knockdown power, because it was a lot bigger slug than what was in this thing. And you could hit a guy in the hand, about knock him down. It really had that much horsepower.
Now, we go to another gun. It's called the 37. We made the 37 at Faultless Caster in Evansville. If you look in front of a lot of veteran places, they have these. They look like a cannon, and we made those from 1942 to 44, but they couldn't penetrate the German tanks. But the 37 is about 5 times the size of that.
Yes.
It's a 37 millimeter in diameter.
Yeah.
And tell us about that.
It was a good round. Worked for recon tanks and things like that, but when they got into heavy armor, they finally come out with a 90 millimeter, and they called it a hyper shot. When that projectile touched something, there was another charge behind it after it came out of the muzzle of the gun, and it went off again, and it'd go through 11 inches of homogeneous armor.
Wow.
Right on through it like you drilled it.
That's not the 37, but the 90.
The 90.
Yeah.
The 90.
Now, tell us about the evolution of tanks in the World War II. We had the 75 millimeter, the Sherman tanks with a projectile that it was difficult to penetrate the German tanks with that 75 millimeter.
It sure was.
And then, but the 75 millimeters were very good against the Japanese, and even the 37 was good at Japanese because their tanks were very thin. But in World War II, if you talk about the Liberators, they were the 14th Armored Division, and they went under General Smith, and Patton went aside of them. But they would put sandbags along their tanks to prevent them from penetrating, from the Panzers penetrating.
Sure.
Could you tell us a little bit about the 75 and then the 90 millimeter cannon?
Didn't have a lot of experience with the 75. I did fire some of them just for practice and for familiarization, they called it. And it was a good round for recon tanks and things like that to use against them. But the 90 millimeter, the German Panzer, which was their heavy tank, man, that 90, it'd go inside and ricochet around. If there's 3 or 4 guys in there, it'd clean them all up. I mean, it'd wipe them out.
So the Germans had some pretty good tanks in World War II, but we had massive amounts of tanks, and we just had more and more.
The Walker Bulldog came into play during World War II, and that was a heck of a tank.
Can you tell us about any of the ammunition that we used in the Korean War and then the Vietnam War, and then subsequent to that? The main ones is all.
Yeah, well, the Korean War we were still with M1 rifles and that kind of thing. When they got into the Korean War, they switched over a lot of them to 7.62 millimeter, which is a little bit lighter weapon, easier to carry, easier to clean. The old M1 reached out there a lot better, farther, I'd say, not any better, but farther. But they had more equipment to move faster and so forth, so they went to 7.62.
Have you shot that a lot, the 7.62?
No, I played with it a little bit, but I shot the M1 a lot.
Is the bullet for the 7.62 bigger than that bullet?
Yes.
A little bit bigger.
A little bit longer. I don't think it's any bigger around, but a little longer.
So that was common in the Korean War, and then did we use that in the Vietnam War as well?
Yes. Yeah, it's still being used today.
Any other, that was our main rifle. How about pistols and how about bigger guns? Any thoughts about any of that?
No, really didn't have a lot. I fired some pistols, but I'd about soon have a slingshot with a 45 pistol. I like the M1 rifle. I was born and raised on it, you might say.
Tell me the different bases that you worked at, and tell me all the different people you trained, and mostly basic trainees, and how well they learned pistol shooting and rifle shooting.
Well, I fired demonstration matches all the way from Southern California to Fort Lewis, Washington.
What year and what year?
And this is in 48 and 49.
Till when?
Until 52. To 52.
So you trained a lot of soldiers. Were farm boys better than city boys?
Oh, heck. Farm boys knew how to shoot before they got there.
And so they just got a lot better.
That's right.
But city boys weren't so good, but city boys did pick it up.
Some city boys were good at it, but most of the time, you could do, them farm boys knew how to use a weapon before they got there. Yeah.
How many years were you in the Army?
I spent 20 years on active duty and another 10 years in the reserve system, so I completed 30 years.
Where did you up and where did you get out?
I was retired in December of 1978 from the Pentagon in Washington, D.C.
And where'd you up in Illinois? Where'd you go into the service in Illinois?
In Illinois, yeah.
Did you have your rifle with you most of the time or part of the time?
Part of the time.
Yeah.
As soon as I went in, I belonged to the National Guard, and they activated the whole unit. And in order to know what was going on with the military, I volunteered to go to Fort Benning, Georgia, to NCO school. And I tell you, that's the best move I ever made in my life. I come out there #1 in my class, and was fortunate, and I was excellent with the M1 rifle. 5 demonstration matches down there for troops and so forth. And they made an instructor out of me, and then they started shipping me all over the place, showing these kids how that M1 would operate.
And they were pretty confident. If they had boot camp for 6 or 8 weeks, by the time they got out of there, they were really proficient at cleaning that rifle and shooting it. And you trained a lot of troops.
Yes. 12,000 of them at Fort Lewis, Washington.
Wow, wow. Well, your service is appreciated by everybody. Do you have any advice for the next generation in regards to what they need to do for the military and what we need to do for our freedom and how we need to train and have more soldiers available for defense of our country?
Well, man, I'm not that familiar with the workings of this organization, but although, as far as I'm concerned, we've got the best military in the world. It's down right now. We got less planes, less men. The whole organization has kind of went downhill here in the last year or two. But the ones that we have are well trained and know what they're doing.
Well, appreciate all your service. Appreciate this. We'll try to make a copy of this, get to you and your kids, so you just have a copy. How was it being a military brat? You got his son here. What was it like being a military brat?
Don't know. I wasn't around a lot of it.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people have kids, and they're not in the middle of all of it. But military is a transient life for some people, where they have to move around. Your wife had to move around, and it's not the easiest for home life sometimes.
Oh, we had one daughter born at Fort Lewis, Washington, when I was stationed there, when I was training all those troops.
Yeah.
Most of them were born in civilian places.
General Patton said the M1 rifle won World War II.
It did.
People will be able to hit people from 300 yards out. The pistol was worthless in hitting troops because we had the lines going and you had the infantry ahead of the tanks, and they had to see the forward observers of the Germans. And Patton said the M1 rifle, M1 carbine, the M1 rifle won World War II for us in Europe. And you could see the value in it. To be able to hit somebody from 300 yards, that's 3 football fields away, and pretty accurately.
Yes.
It's an amazing invention. I don't know who invented the M1 rifle, but it was...
They sent me to Camp Perry, Ohio, which the national matches were held up there one year. And their longest range was 1,000 yards. And I watched guys get up there in a prone position and fire that M1 rifle and hit that target 1,000 yards away. He had a coach with him with binoculars looking down there, and the guy on the target would wave a flag to let him know whether he hit it or missed or something. But at 1,000 yards, they were accurate with the M1 rifle.
1,000 yards. That's about 3/4 of a mile.
Yes.
That's amazing distance, but it changes the way troops had to operate in Europe because if they could hit you that far away, you were in problems if they could see you. Yes.
Got good with them.
If you read the book, I think it's Barbarossa. It's about Stalingrad, the defense of Stalingrad. It was a sniper that held off the Germans for a whole 3 or 4 months. Just a sniper down there, and he probably was hitting every bit of 1,000 yards.
Oh yeah.
He held the Germans out.
The National Matches Code, you get the best.
Yes.
From all branches of service, Army, Navy, Marine.
Yeah.
And they were good.
Yeah.
I enjoyed that tour.
Well, thank you very much, Floyd, and glad you got some good news today, and tell your wife happy birthday today.
Okay.